In May of 2023, my brother Joe, friends Scott, Brian, Randy, and I ventured for 3 days and 2 nights into the Aravaipa Canyon wilderness. Our approach was from the west entrance to the canyon, where we quickly submerged our feet into the namesake creek and walked 5 miles to near the center of the 12-mile-long gorge. Joe and I got a later start and met up with our friends several hours later near the entrance to one of the 9 side canyons. Almost immediately into our hike, Joe and I were greeted by one of the wild turkeys that roamed the area. Striking out about 2 p.m. from the parking lot, we were pleasantly shaded by either the abundant trees or the shadows cast by the high walls along the creek's course. The water was a refreshing contrast to the warm spring afternoon. We took our time, making our way to our friends, honoring the journey rather than the destination. We were, after all, in the canyon, surrounded by its beauty, serenaded by the birds and the stream, quenched by the beverages we carried, and amused by each other's company. We came to a larger pool near a bend in the creek, and after admiring the fish, Joe plunged into the cool water while I studied the many saguaro cactus clinging to the cliffs. Continuing, we sensed the afternoon light evolving into evening as we neared our friends. The canyon runs generally east to west, but the meanders of the creek and the setting sun lends darkness to the floor of the canyon, many hues of orange and yellow to the stone faces of the cliffs, and a wrinkled combination of the lavender sky and buff mountains in the reflection of the stream itself. The canyon is limited to 20 persons per day, 10 from each end of the wilderness. This helps provide solitude for visitors, reduce impacts to the fragile environment, and ensure protection for the unique plants and animals that call this region home. Although we didn't see any on this trip, the area boasts herds of desert sheep, coatimundi, mountain lions, and bears. We did spot a few deer, bats, frogs, lizards, and innumerable species of birds. The bird song each morning is striking. Hundreds of birds, competing with each other, talked about the prospects for the new day. For us, it would be a trip up and into a portion of Aravaipa Canyon. After coffee and a mediocre breakfast, we made our way to the entrance of the slot, up and into its drainage. A stale trickle of water coursed down small cracks and chutes along the way, but no impressive waterfall or flood that carved this tributary. I imagine the scene after a summer storm, and the torrent that must startle everything. The power of the water is nakedly obvious here. Aravaipa Canyon has smooth walls and a bottom worn into slides, tubs, and potholes by the friction of the water. The results are stunning and easy to negotiate on a warm, dry spring morning. Since it had been some time since the last precipitation, most of the pools were dark and opaque, lined with algae and swimming with tadpoles and water striders. I brought along an inflatable tube, hoping to soak up the early afternoon in one of the bigger pools in Aravaipa Canyon, but lost my enthusiasm when I considered the risks of immersion in its mysterious depths. We carefully passed a hummingbird nest with 2 eggs inside the size of jelly beans on our return to the larger canyon. After a quick lunch, we celebrated Brian's birthday with games of bocce ball and Jenga, challenged each other to strongman contests, a juggling competition, and enjoyed the general camaraderie of the afternoon spent with great friends in such a special place. We soaked in the creek for a couple hours before setting out for an exploration of Aravaipa Canyon, another one of the many tributaries of Aravaipa Creek. Fellow campers we passed warned that their attempt at Aravaipa Canyon earlier that day was met with scrambling and bushwhacking, which made it unpleasant and therefore only briefly interesting. We proceeded, but agreed with their assessment quickly and settled for another happy hour in the main channel, admiring the different perspective this portion of the creek provided. The canyon was wider here, and clear views to the tablelands above could be enjoyed. With the light of the afternoon fading, we returned to our camp and started a celebratory fire. We learned through an essay I shared that this canyon was once home to a group of indigenous Aravaipa Apache. In 1871, several women from this band arrived at nearby Camp Grant, a U.S. government outpost near the confluence of Aravaipa Creek and the San Pedro River. This camp, which was apparently about 10 miles from our own camp that evening, hosted the women, fed them, and soon hundreds of the Aravaipa Apache were communal with the Camp Grant personnel. Camp Grant was established at the confluence of the San Pedro River and Aravaipa Creek because it was a busy intersection. Natives could travel north along the San Pedro to reach the Gila River and eventually California. They could head south and into Sonora, Mexico. To the east, the Apache could make their way through Aravaipa Canyon, a shortcut to the eastern Gila River, New Mexico, and onto the Rio Grande Valley. And west of Camp Grant, a large wash was easy to follow to the Santa Cruz River and into Tucson. Camp Grant was tasked with controlling the Indians, maintaining peace and order. The camp was successful, and through an offering of food and work in exchange for ending hostilities, hundreds of Aravaipa Apache settled near the camp and the west entrance to Aravaipa Canyon. However, several regional murders and robberies were being attributed to the Aravaipa Apache, and a vigilante posse was formed. After a few days' planning, on the morning of April 30th, 1871, several Anglo-Americans from Tucson, along with many Mexican Americans and many more Tohono O'odham Indians, surrounded the Apache. Most of the Apache men were off hunting in the mountains, leaving mostly women and children who were surprised and unarmed. The Tohono O'odham are noted as having done most of the fighting, though the Americans seem to have helped ensure no Aravaipa Apache escaped. In the end, 144 were killed. All but 8 were reportedly women and children. How earlier we found ourselves surprised and approached by some Tucsonians, who insisted we quiet down. Perhaps they were offended by my rendition of "Oh Susanna" on Randy's harmonica. At peace with ourselves and enjoying a celebration of Brian's birthday, we had no enthusiasm for war and honored their request. Back at our campsite, we toasted to our friendship and Brian's trip around the sun, roasted hot dogs, sang, danced, fell into tents and out of hammocks, and were dazzled by the sapphire stars. Our second morning, I was again startled by the character of the birds in the canyon, lively and vocal at the first hint of dawn, and they seemed so happy and satisfied. I don't blame them. Aravaipa Canyon is a beautiful place, and for birds it must be an Eden. Abundant water, which enables miles of trees, which hosts infinite insects, seems to have all the virtues of a paradise for our feathered friends. After breakfast, we packed up, put on our wet shoes, and headed for home. The hike back was quicker, with a lighter pack and the weight of the city off our minds. I saw the same turkey along the way. He greeted me as he had 2 days earlier, with a gobble and display of feathers. I got separated from my friends as we neared the trailhead, and doubled back not once or twice, but 3 times. The winter runoff produced some heavy brush that obscured any signage, or at least it seemed to for me. The others found their way before me, and as I stepped into the parking lot, my friends were driving away. Joe seemed relieved that I arrived, and together we started for home. I've spent several days now considering our weekend in Aravaipa Canyon. Although it was perhaps my 5th trip into the area, it still inspired me and induced a calmness a few days in the wilderness always does. It was special to witness my brother and our pals discover the beauty of the region. I'm already looking forward to my next visit to Aravaipa, a few days spent in its water, under its trees, beneath its cliffs, and among my friends.